Imagine waking up in the middle of nowhere, barefoot, with no memory of how you got there, no phone, no water, and nothing around you but scorching red desert stretching in every direction for hundreds of miles. Now imagine surviving there for over 2 months, eating leeches straight out of a muddy waterhole just to stay alive. This isn't a movie. This actually happened to a man named Ricky Megee in one of the most brutal, unforgiving landscapes on Earth. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how he made it out alive. January 2006. Ricky Megee is driving along the Bunteen Highway, a remote stretch of road cutting through the Northern Territory in Australia, one of the loneliest and most isolated regions on the entire continent, where you can drive for hours without passing another vehicle, another building, or another sign of human life. What happens next is something Megee himself has never fully clarified. At different points, he's given conflicting accounts, at times saying his car simply broke down, and at other times claiming he was carjacked by an armed group and drugged. What is clear is this. Somehow, Megee ends up stranded, alone, deep in the Australian outback, with no vehicle, no supplies, and, according to his own account, no shoes on his feet. The area where he finds himself is part of the Tanami Desert, a vast sun-scorched wilderness known for daytime temperatures that regularly climb past 40 degrees Celsius, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while nighttime temperatures can drop dramatically once the sun disappears, leaving almost no comfortable hours anywhere in the daily cycle. It's flat, dry, and largely featureless, the kind of landscape where a person can walk for days without seeing a single road, building, or another human being, with heat shimmer distorting the horizon in every direction. The Northern Territory alone covers well over 1 million square kilometers, most of it sparsely populated outback, meaning that even a relatively short detour off a known road can place a person hundreds of kilometers from the nearest town, farmhouse, or passing vehicle, with no idea which direction leads to safety, and no way of knowing how far away help might actually be. Megee makes a decision that, in his own words, was based on faulty logic, but was the best plan he could come up with at the time. He starts walking, barefoot, on ground that alternates between burning hot sand and sharp rocky scrub. He keeps moving, reasoning that the more distance he covers, the smaller the area searchers would eventually need to check if anyone ever came looking for him at all. For 10 brutal days, Megee walks through this landscape with essentially nothing. No food, no reliable water source, no shelter from a sun intense enough to blister exposed skin within minutes. His feet, already bare, become increasingly torn, blistered and damaged from the harsh ground beneath him. Cut by rocks and burned by scorching sand with every single step, every day blurs into the next, marked only by the punishing heat of the afternoon and the surprising bitter cold of the desert night, with nothing to eat and nothing to drink beyond whatever moisture he can occasionally scavenge. Eventually, after those 10 grueling days of walking, Megee stumbles across something that will end up saving his life. A small, muddy dam on a remote cattle station, one of the sprawling ranch properties that dot this part of the Northern Territory, often spanning distances larger than some entire countries. It isn't clean, it isn't safe by any normal standard, murky and full of insects and debris, but it's water. And out here, water means the difference between living and dying. Megee sets up a rough camp beside the dam, using whatever materials he can scavenge from the surrounding landscape, scraps of wire, plastic sheeting, and branches, to build a crude shelter against the relentless sun and the freezing nights. And then begins a stretch of survival that goes far beyond those first 10 days of walking. In total, Megee remained stranded out there for roughly 71 days, nearly 2.5 months, living off almost nothing but what the harsh desert itself is willing to offer him. His diet during this time is almost impossible to imagine choosing voluntarily under any other circumstances. He eats leeches, pulled straight out of the muddy dam water and consumed raw on the spot. He eats grasshoppers caught around the water's edge, snatched up whenever he can find them. He catches frogs, threading them onto scraps of wire and drying them in the sun on top of his makeshift shelter until they're crisp enough to eat safely. Whatever edible plants he can identify nearby become part of his survival diet as well, tested cautiously in a place where a wrong guess could easily be fatal. It's a menu built entirely out of desperation, made up of whatever the desert is willing to offer a starving man with absolutely no other options available to him. Beyond the constant hunger, isolation itself becomes its own kind of enemy. With no one to talk to, no clock, and no calendar, Megee later described losing any real sense of how much time was passing, with days blending together into one long, indistinguishable stretch of survival, broken only by sunrise, sunset, and the next search for food or water. Water remains a constant, grinding struggle throughout the entire ordeal. Megee collects dew that forms overnight using scraps of plastic sheeting he finds scattered near the property, wringing out whatever moisture he can gather each morning before the sun burns it away completely. When rain does fall, rare and unpredictable in this climate, he drinks from the temporary puddles it leaves behind, knowing each one might be the only fresh water he sees for days at a time. As the weeks stretch into months, Megee's body pays an enormous visible price. He loses an almost unbelievable amount of weight, somewhere in the range of 60 kilograms, well over 130 pounds, as his body essentially begins consuming itself, trying to survive on starvation rations of insects, amphibians, and whatever scraps of nutrition he can scrape together. By the time he's eventually discovered, he looks less like the man who originally went missing, and more like a walking skeleton, his frame reduced to almost nothing after months of sustained, relentless deprivation. Finally, in April of 2006, Megee is discovered by workers on the remote cattle property, sheltering near the same muddy dam that had kept him alive for so long. The news of his survival breaks almost immediately, and it spreads fast across the country and beyond, because what he's just endured sounds less like something that actually happens to real people and more like the plot of an extreme survival thriller. When doctors examine him afterward, the physical evidence is undeniable. His body shows every sign consistent with an extended period of extreme deprivation and exposure, exactly the kind of condition you'd expect from someone who had genuinely spent over 2 months alone in one of the harshest, most punishing environments on the planet. Whatever the true circumstances of how he initially became stranded, there's no disputing what his body actually went through in order to survive it. The condition doctors find him in speaks for itself far more clearly than any of his shifting explanations for how he got there. Severe muscle wasting, deep dehydration, and skin damage consistent with prolonged sun exposure all point to the same conclusion. Whatever brought him to that stretch of highway, the months that followed were unmistakably real and unmistakably close to fatal. Police investigate the case thoroughly, examining Megee's shifting and sometimes contradictory accounts of a possible abduction, but ultimately find no evidence of any crime having been committed against him, and his vehicle is never located anywhere in the surrounding region. The exact truth of how a man ends up alone, barefoot, and disoriented on a remote highway remains, to this day, something only Megee himself truly knows, and even his own retelling over the years has never fully settled into one single consistent version of events. What isn't in dispute, though, is the sheer scale of what his body endured once he found himself stranded out there with nothing. Whatever set the ordeal into motion, the following weeks became a pure test of raw survival instinct, played out against one of the most punishing landscapes on the entire planet, with almost nothing standing between Megee and death except his own stubborn will to keep finding water, keep finding food, and keep waking up to try again the next morning. In the years since, Megee has spoken publicly about the experience on multiple occasions, eventually writing a full account of it in a memoir describing both the physical ordeal itself and the immense psychological toll of enduring more than 2 months of total isolation with no certainty that rescue would ever actually come. He's described the raw desperation of those early days walking barefoot through the desert, and the strange, grim rhythm that eventually took over once he settled permanently by the dam, waking each day with one single narrow goal: find enough water and enough food to survive until nightfall, and then simply do it all again the following morning. So what do we actually take from a story like this? It's a reminder of just how far Outback survival can push the absolute boundaries of what a human body and mind are capable of enduring, and how sheer stubborn persistence, the simple refusal to stop trying, can carry someone through conditions that seem almost designed to end a person's life within days rather than months. It's also a genuinely unsettling reminder of how vast, empty, and unforgiving true wilderness can still be, even in a modern developed country, and how quickly the entire modern world can disappear. Once you're far enough away from a road, next time you're stuck in traffic, annoyed about a long day at work, or complaining about being thirsty on a hot afternoon, remember there was a man who survived over 2 months in the Australian desert eating leeches and grasshoppers, drinking dew wrung out of plastic sheeting, and somehow made it out the other side alive. If this story caught your attention the way it caught mine, make sure you're subscribed, because there are more incredible true survival stories just like this one still to come.